welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. And I'm your host and founder, Jen Noseworthy. Thank you for tuning in to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM Gulf Coast. I've got a special guest from Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, tonight waiting backstage, who I'll bring on shortly for this UPRN segment number 19 with Paranormal NL. Now, our Viking themed guest backstage is just in time, right after St. Paddy's Day, about the Newfoundland Irish culture and Vikings. That's right. Newfoundland was discovered by Viking Leif Erikson and had a Viking village in Lonesome Meadows. PNL Podcast is sponsored by the BOG team, a boots on the ground team doing local historical paranormal investigations in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. PNL Podcast believes in supporting international paranormal networking and highlighting global paranormal people, places, and things. If you'd like to be a guest on my show or have local historical or heritage building that you'd like investigated, contact paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com. You can follow PNL Podcast and the BOG team on their link tree, Paranormal NL Podcast. Now, let's get on with the show. Tonight, I have on with me, we have Gina Hodge-Noordhof, and she is from North Newfoundland, Labrador, Canada. Welcome, Gina.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for being on the show tonight at such short notice. Yeah, we're really excited to have a Viking episode. I've had a lot of people asking me to do one and reaching out. So I'm really glad to have you on. So tell me a little bit about the different things that you have. You're an entrepreneur, you're an author, you're an owner of several different establishments. And tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I've been in business, in the restaurant business for 28 years in Lonesome Meadows, right in the village. And so we have a fine dining restaurant and an art gallery. And now we have accommodations like a bed and breakfast and vacation rentals. And I also write children's books. One has become a bestseller. I've sold over 29,000 copies of my first book, actually. But the others are really popular as well. I sell a lot of those. And I invented a product to teach little kids how to ice skate as well, called the Whiz Train.
So, Gina, for people listening around the world here, can you explain where Lonesome Meadows is in Newfoundland or around the world?
Lonesome Meadows is at the very tip of the northern peninsula or the province of Newfoundland. So from St. John's, it's 1,030 kilometers to drive. Maybe about 600 as the crow flies. So you can take a flight. There's a 1-hour flight from St. John's on Provincial Airlines, but if you want to drive, you can either come in through St. John's or come in through Deer Lake. It's a little closer in Deer Lake, but so it's right on the tip of the island, the big island of Newfoundland. A lot of people think it's small, but it's actually quite large.
Yes, our island is quite large. So if you're going to come visit us, you got to come either by ferry or fly. Yeah. So tell me, how did you get involved with living and having a business up in Lonesome Meadows?
Well, my mother was a pioneer in the industry, and she owned a bed and breakfast called Valhalla for since 1986. So she was one of the first bed and breakfast owners in Lonesome Meadows, and I grew up helping her. And then when I got old enough, she had bought this building when she bought her first property. And then I said, well, maybe when I was about 22, I said, and I was at university, I said, maybe I should open a little cafe. And so I did. And then I met my husband at university and dragged him up there. And ever since we've been up there. But I mean, I love it so much because the sunsets are incredible. I feel the sun and the moon are because where our restaurant is located, we get these most incredible sunsets. And they sort of on June 21st, summer solstice, it'll set at the tip of the Great Sacred Island right in front of L'Anse aux Meadows, and then it moves back. So the whole summer, the sun is setting in front of us. So it's quite
Nice, nice.
yeah.
I guess I can throw some pictures up on screen, but right now I have L'Anse aux Meadows, the National Historic Site,
Yeah, that's
up there on screen. Did you want to talk a little bit about what is actually at the site?
yeah. So the buildings that you see there, the grass buildings, they were replicas of the actual buildings that would have been there. There are mounds that indicate that there were buildings there, and right now they're a little farther away from the sea than they would have been 1,000 years ago, because we have something called isostatic rebound. So the land is actually coming up. It's like a pillow when you lie your head on the pillow and then it comes up. It's sort of coming up. So it's at 1,000 years ago, it would have been closer to the ocean. But
Okay.
yeah, and the Erickson family lived there. Leif Erikson, I mean, he didn't first discover the site. It was Bjarni Herjolfsson who discovered it, but he didn't come in and step his foot on the land. Leif was the one that came and about 10 years later, he came and then he made a settlement there.
Now, Leif has got ties to your family. Is that right?
No, not really. Well, I mean, my great-grandmother was a Hedderson, but I don't think I have connections to the Erickson family. No, maybe. You never know.
Never know. And
yeah,
we've got statues of him. I know there's one over here.
Yeah, there's a statue. It was by the Seattle Washington Foundation of Leif Erikson. They donated a statue and put it at the waterfront, at the harbor front in L'Anse aux Meadows, and that's a really nice thing to have. And you can get really wonderful pictures of the sun setting with Leif.
Nice.
And he's looking towards Iceland, or Greenland. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about the Norsemen. I've got or Valhalla by the Sea. I've got this one pulled up here.
So the Norsemen is a fine dining restaurant. We focus on organic and fresh and local, and we try to use, we keep our lobsters in crates over the wharf. And so then we bring up so many lobsters every day, and my husband has a tank that has the ocean water in there. And then we try to focus on what's local. We do get beef and chicken and things from PEI, and lamb and duck from Quebec. So we try to focus on local and fresh and organic and
since we're talking about local and fresh and organic, I know off air we were chatting a little bit about the history of Newfoundland, where it was called Vinland. For example, when the Vikings came over here, we were talking about berries and some of the things that they used to drink and why.
So L'Anse aux Meadows, I mean, it's so plentiful. I can understand why it was such a special place for them to be there, because it's so abundant in resources, like food resources. So the bay is filled with scallops and lobster and crab and mackerel and herring and whatever cod, of course, and then.
Well, some people thought that they called it Vinland for the grapes, but we were thinking.
So the berries are very plentiful. I grew up in St. Anthony, but we would always go to L'Anse aux Meadows to pick the berries, even though back then it was a dirt road and it was 40 kilometers away. It would take us a few hours to get there. We would still make the trip to L'Anse aux Meadows to pick them because they were so plentiful there. So the Vikings were in transition from paganism to Christianity. They were actually forced by the King of Norway to become Christian. They said, well, we won't trade with you in Iceland or Greenland if you don't become Christian. So they were kind of forced to become Christian in the North Atlantic. And so I think that, maybe it was the berries that they were picking to make wine. I mean, they say grapes, but I don't... they wouldn't have had access to grapes unless they traveled further south. But I mean, I can't see why, they weren't wine people, because Southern Europeans were wine people, but Northern Europeans, the Vikings drank honey mead. So
Honey
they didn't
mead,
drink
yes.
wine, right? And so maybe because they were Christians now, they had to have access to wine, right? So they needed wine. So, the berries worked. Like, I mean, there's all kinds of places that make berry wine, and it works like wine. So I'm sure that was probably one of the reasons that they came here. It was business, right? Like it was big business. I mean, having access to the berries to make wine and to sell to Norway and, the Faroes and the Shetlands and, all the Viking places in the north.
And there's a lot of different culture and heritage and folklore related to the Vikings of the Lansing Meadow areas.
Yeah. So I wrote a book called Snorri Thorfinnsson, and it's basically, I had a German illustrator do this one actually because I wanted a more medieval feel, but it's about the sagas. Snorri was the first European baby born in North America, and his mother was Gundrid, and she was once married to Leif Erikson's brother Thorsten. But Thorsten actually ended up dying of a pandemic. He went to Western Greenland, and then there was a pandemic going around. They were actually trying to get back to Lansing Meadows because Thorvald, their brother, had killed some native people, and they retaliated against him and killed him. And then, so the brother Thorsten was trying to get back here to get his body, but he got sick. Well, no, I think it was a storm that year, and then he went back to Greenland, and he ended up dying of a pandemic. So Gudrid, she went to the Eastern Fjord, and she married a man named, Leif introduced her to this man named Thorfinn Karlsefni, and then they came to Lansing Meadows, and they spent a bunch of years there, and they had a child named Snorri, and he was the first European baby. So so there's a whole story that's there from the sagas, and sagas were stories that were written down about 200 years. So the Vikings would tell the stories around the fire, so they didn't have a written language as such. So it was years later, like hundreds of years later, that these stories that were told around this fire were written down. Actually, my grandmother, she found an amber necklace on the riverbank in Lansing Meadows. And so in 1920, when she was a child, and then in 1960, her house burned, and along with it, the amber necklace. But in the sagas, they talk about Gundrid and Freydis, or Leif Erikson's sister-in-law and sister, wore amber, because I guess they traded with the Baltic, and it would have been something that they wore. So it's very possible that my grandmother, that's how I'm connected. That's what you were saying.
There you go. I knew there was some kind of connection.
And as as a group, because, and even like Gundrid and coming over to do the wine and to gather and bring things back to, she was they were business people, right? So I feel very connected in that way, because we're business people, and then our kids kind of grew up in Lansing Meadows in the summertime, and I can imagine Snorri running around there, and how special Lansing Meadows really is, like that, especially July and August, when the weather's fantastic.
I was gonna. There's some of the attractions here that
there's unique sea caves. Actually, see that sea cave? It looks like the eye of a rock monster.
This one here,
Lansing Meadows. That's past Norstead on that side, and it's a very deep cave. And in the middle of it, there's a pet cemetery. So people would put the bones of their animals in the middle of this cave.
Oh, that's weird. When you go in, really?
See, yeah. You can see the bones, so it's shale, right?
Huh.
And
interesting.
Lots of icebergs, and I was telling you about how last year I seen all of these icebergs coming up. On like Facebook, people were posting those icebergs in Newfoundland, within Newfoundland, and to me they looked like spirits, like Viking spirits, but there was one that looked like a gladiator, or some kind of spirits, like whales and. I sent you the video. I don't know if We can.
Oh, yes, I can try to go in and share that. We can put that on
Put it to kind
the
of.
link in the comments so you could see that video. I
So I
was
really feel that the Vikings were around last summer with the icebergs that were coming in, because they all look like some kind of Viking spirit, right? And also talking about spirits, I've been open. Well, I remember in 1999, the government had a program called Soirees and Times. It was like dinner theater, and so we would do skits and storytelling and traditional music and square dancing, and we would serve a meal, and we would have 60 people in the restaurant. And so before that, I went around to the village, to the old people who have mostly passed away now. But I went to gather stories, ghost stories, and stories about.
Oh, fun. Okay.
So I did gather a few that were kind of spirits. Like there was one about how the Vikings, or they would hear people speaking in foreign voices, and the rowing of oars and the rattling of pots and pans on a certain day in July. I think it was like July 1st, and they were afraid to go down to their stages, where the fishing stages on the water,
Right.
that night, because they would hear this every year. It would reoccur, right? And it was funny because they didn't really know about the Viking, and they said this was stories that were from prior to the Ingsteds coming there and asking, what did you see anything that would look like a Viking site, right, in the 1960s. So this was stories from prior to. So they were hearing these spirits prior to the Ingsteds coming there. And then there was another one. It was called the Brown Man, a Muddy Cove. And Muddy Cove is between Lansa Meadows and the next village called Hay Cove. And there's sort of a cove there where the UNESCO site turns in. And people would say how they would see this brown man in Muddy Cove. And it wasn't that he was brown, it was that his clothes were brown.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And he would play tricks on them. Like if people were riding their snowmobiles with their Cometics, or their, dog teams are with Cometic back then probably, he would hold it and he wouldn't let them go, right? And it was sort of like, I know in southern Newfoundland, they have fairies, right? And
right, I was just going to mention the fae, yes.
And usually in Newfoundland, fairies are bad or mischievous. They were kind of the scapegoat of why you should be home before dark, or why you shouldn't go in the forest by yourself, or why the baby died, or why the man went missing at sea. So usually the fairies were the scapegoat, and the way of explaining to the kids what happened, and so
yeah, I've heard lots of stories where the fairies, took your child in the woods or
yes,
something like that. Because
I actually wrote a book on that too. It's called The New Recruits, and it's about a good fairy finding a baby right, in the forest.
I was looking for your books here. Now this must be the cave that you were talking about that has the cemetery in there.
The bone. I do have a picture of the bones in the middle. I think it's there somewhere, but yeah, this is fairly deep too.
Interesting.
This one looks like Krypton, right? Like you look from outside, it reminds me of Krypton. And then there's another one nearer to there. You could see pictures. See the cave. There's some cave ones there, but that's over in Raleigh, which is
There's
about
a video here too. I don't. Yeah. You want me to play this one and see?
Yeah, I think that's a tourism ad.
Okay, let's watch this one.
Actually, I think my kids are in one of these. Maybe not this one. Not this one. This is not my kids, but these are my friends' kids. O'Brien. So my kids are in one of these ads. Actually, they're riding a bicycle. These are the O'Brien kids. They're from St. John's. They own the O'Brien's boat tours in Bay
5 centuries before Columbus.
So this
fearless warriors.
Those are in Lansa Meadows
to discover.
And it kind of looks like
the Vikings.
Like Star Wars when you go in there too.
Well, they left behind their mark.
So
they have long
that are,
since gone.
Locals know about. And it's probably a little bit difficult
So
for
far
the
as we can tell,
tourists to get to them, actually. They would probably have to have a guide.
Newfoundland and Labrador.
Because I've tried to send people out to the cave in Aux Meadows, and it depends on the tide. Like, you got to make sure that the tide is low, and you got to stay along the seashore to get to it, the one that looks like Krypton.
Yeah, you don't want to be stuck down there when the tide is high. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
the tide's high, but you can walk up around the other side. But yeah, sometimes people are a little bit leery about going out because it's along shale and stuff. So, I mean, I know exactly how it works. I've gone out with my kids and it's fine, right? But you got to climb this shale along.
Well, there's definitely lots of stuff to do there.
Definitely.
For
There's
sure.
2 Viking sites. There's Norstead, which is basically what it would have been if the Vikings had stayed in the area. And it's aesthetically, like, you see that big Viking ship that's at Norstead, and there's a
Right here?
chieftain's hall and a blacksmith. No, the one sort of out of the water there, the
one that they were building, or that looked
go up
like
a
it
little
was
bit.
being built. Yes.
Yeah, this one
Up
here.
here, this
That's
one.
a boat. That one was actually given to Norstead by the Land's End. So they did that commemorate 1,000 years since the Vikings had come. And Hodge Carter, who's a famous kind of adventurer, actually I think he was related to Jimmy Carter, who just passed.
No, wasn't there a replica boat that they had built that they sailed around?
Yeah, that was that one, Snorri. It was called Snorri as well.
That was the boat. This one in the photo.
So there was a crew from the United States that came and sort of sailed that from Greenland or from Iceland over to.
Yeah, I remember that. It was here. It was in the harbor. It was over in.
Oh, maybe that was a different one though. This one they came right over to Aux Meadows and ended there, and then they donated the boat to Norstead.
Wow.
And,
okay.
And then now we've had a museum there ever since, and it's a fantastic site as well. So the UNESCO one has the actual artifacts, the actual mounds and replica buildings. And then Norstead is basically what it would have been if the Vikings had stayed. So, there's people telling your fortune, like, doing runes telling. I have my runes telling.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah, because one of our members of the BOG team, Dan, he's heavily into Vikings. And we've had some really weird hits off of his Viking necklace at several different places that we were in. That was a Christian place. And the spirits there were very angry that we had pagan stuff.
Pagan symbols, yeah. Well, there's
not like it.
In Iceland, actually. So the Icelanders sort of wore a dragon cross. So they kind of hid the fact that they were pagans, right? They were still pagans because they made this new Thor's hammer that was specifically Icelandic. To sort of, say that they're still Christians and still pagans. So they were in transition. You can tell by the Icelandic Thor's hammer. Look that up, Icelandic Thor's hammer.
Kind of like the hammer that guy there has in his hand. And
Thor, god of thunder, he has, there's actually a lot of jewelry with Thor's hammer.
Okay. Yeah, that's a popular one. And do you have many people ask you about rune rocks and things like that?
Yeah, people ask us all the time about it, but there is a lady that tells your rune stones at Norstead, so you can go and she'll tell you your fortune. And that's basically, so like I say, they didn't have a written language, but they did have runes, and the runes were basically for telling your fortune, right, or telling what the future has to hold. So
interesting that they didn't have a written language. How did they communicate?
Well, they communicated by the stories, so they were really good. They were so accurate. Like, there's an island off of Aux Meadows that's filled with gulls, and in the sagas they mentioned that island. So they were very specific about the things that they told in their sagas. And there's the Skullhold map. Actually, that was made in mid 1500s, and it was basically this guy. he read all the Icelandic sagas, and he was able to make a map that corresponded with, I have a picture here actually, corresponded with what's actually there today. So based on the stories that, the Icelandic stories that
Is it the one called Devil's Island?
Around the fire. So they were very, I think they would probably get scolded or something if they told the story wrong, but it was very specific. It wasn't like that game. Remember the game you played and you would say something and then you would pass it along in the circle. And by the time it got to the end of the circle, the story would change. That's not the case for the Vikings. Their stories stayed true to what it actually was. And we know that because they were able to make this map that was accurate to today's map. And
are we talking about the Isle of Demons?
Oh, no. Yeah, I haven't mentioned that yet. But this is called the Skullhold map. And so
okay.
see,
there it is. Okay.
And then Skraeling, this is Southern Labrador, and Markland is Labrador. And then this is Baffin, Greenland. And then there's the Faroe, Shetland, Orkney. I've always been intrigued by this, though. This is called Friesland, and that doesn't exist. So everything else corresponds, but Friesland doesn't exist. But if you look off the west coast of Ireland, it looks like something might have sank, and that would correspond with it. They probably, it's probably a bit out of place, but
okay.
I always think
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and is that one of your books?
This is in my
hold up the cover there.
The Snorri Thorfinnsson.
Yes, that was the one I was looking for. Okay.
My husband actually said he learned more, even though it's a children's book. So one side is for the little ones. It's a poem, and then I have a lullaby, and then there's a little music piece that you can listen to the medieval lullaby sound, right? And
interesting. Okay, yeah.
And there's a lullaby. And so then the other side, the actual sagas, and then there's like artifacts and stuff, information about the artifacts.
What artifact was that you're showing there?
That's, pardon me?
What artifact was that one that you were showing?
Oh, that was an arrowhead, but there's the cloak pin. That's one of the things that they found in Meadows.
Yes, they did. I remember that, yeah.
And my friend from Sweden.
Do they have that pin on display in Meadows?
Yeah, they do. I think and they have it at the, I think they have a replica at the rooms as well.
Yes,
this is, my friend made me an amber necklace, but this wasn't the one that my grandmother had found. But my friend figured this might what it would look like. Although my mother said it was more triangle and it was more delicate, like it was, but yeah.
Okay. And then the necklace that you have on, you're saying that's more of like a...
This is runes, like it's... Yes,
you can see them on there. Wow. Do you have your other books there?
Yeah, this one is my bestseller. This is the 12 Days of Christmas in Newfoundland Labrador. So this is all about...
puffin. Do you want to tell people about the puffin?
Yeah, so the puffin is a bird that, well, you do see them off on the islands in Meadows.
Yes.
But mostly like Bonavista, you would see them in Elliston. You can see them in the summer months.
In all of our paranormal,
and they'll take you out to, sometimes they'll see them, but Elliston, I think you're more likely
Elliston,
to see them.
yes, they're popular out there too. I was going to mention that in all of our logos, we always hide a little puffin somewhere. So if you notice in any of our logos, if you notice in the bottom there's one right up over the flag.
So the little puffin's doing whatever the pictures. So he's a Viking.
Oh, cute! A Viking puffin.
Days of Christmas in Newfoundland Labrador version of the 12 Days of Christmas. So 3 Norse, right? And then 5 caribou.
Oh. The caribou. Now, you were telling me a story about the caribou, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. I was telling you how, so in the fairy book, fairies are normally mischievous or bad. So my fairy book is about a good fairy, and it's also about a caribou. And in Newfoundland, our caribou are usually the females, we get a really weird subspecies of reindeer, because it's the same. Caribou and reindeer are actually the same animals, but I guess the Europeans call them reindeer, we call them caribou. But we have a subspecies that doesn't, the females don't get antlers, only like a small percentage. And everywhere else in the world, the females get antlers. So I don't know why in Newfoundland they don't. So in my book, it has a antlered female reindeer, and she's kind of an outcast in her kind too. So the fairy and the reindeer kind of have to find a way of getting this baby back to its adult human parents. So she sprinkles some fairy dust on the caribou, and then they fly to the North Pole, and then they get Santa. They get Santa. Santa helps them, and then Santa recruits them to the North Pole. That's why it's called the North Pole.
That's cute. So you've got two of those books. Do you have any other books there?
Yeah, and I did do one on Alberta. So the same concept.
Okay.
For Alberta. My husband is actually originally, well, he grew up in Alberta. His dad is Dutch. He's from the Netherlands. That's why my last name is Noordhof.
Okay. Yeah, we have two members of the Bog team from Alberta.
Really?
And there's a lot of people in Newfoundland and Labrador who went to Alberta and came back home after the oil boom over there.
Yes, I do. I do oil and hockey and like the oil part. So, and then the facts on the side about, so these are very popular books, but so I've done 4. And then, and then our houses too, we have these really old houses in Gunner's Cove that Annie Prue, she was the writer of the Shipping News. She once owned them. She actually took 10 years refurbishing them. And she, I think the Coyle's house that we have is kind of looks like, the house that Coyle would have had in the Shipping News. And then Wavy's we've got them named after the Shipping News characters. And so that's Annie Prue. She was a famous author. People from all over the world know about her. And so the one house is from the late 1800s. And people claim that they heard this one. Yes, that one, the blue one. So we put new siding. We put new Cape Cod siding on it a couple of years ago. They were just white for years. But they're really lovely. We've kept the integrity of the inside, and we haven't changed it. Like it's, but we, upgraded, so it's lovely. But we've kept some of the historical, insides and the windows. Annie Prue actually, she had windows custom made, and so but they weren't very functional. So then we had to get windows that were more functional.
That's with our weather here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Oh yeah, she got them handmade, and they didn't have double panes. So these are wonderful windows, and we've had new roofs.
Do you think that's part of the reason why, Gina, that the Vikings left Newfoundland, because of the weather?
No, because I think our weather is fantastic in comparison to where they would have come from. It was because Thorvald, remember I told you about Thorvald, the brother that retaliated against or that killed some natives for the sake of it. And then they retaliated against him. He caused bad conflict because Eric Leaf, he came over and he was peaceful, and he wanted to, he wanted to be Christian, and he cared about the people that were here, the native people. And then he wanted to have good relations, but then he became the chieftain of Greenland. And then, Thorvald, so then he left it to his brothers and sisters to come over. And you know what it is like when you let somebody else run your business. Usually don't work.
Not the same.
He came over and killed some people, and then started, conflict. And so then they didn't trust him. Okay. And I think they told him to they had to leave because it was too difficult.
Bad relations with the locals.
Another story actually that we used to tell in our dinner theater was about milk, about how the Vikings gave the natives milk, and they were lactose intolerant.
Oh, no.
They got sick, right? So then the native people thought they were trying to poison them. So that could have been another reason that the conflict happened. So who knows, like, but I think it was more about the conflict between the two cultures than anything.
Interesting. So the Vikings gave them milk.
Yeah, so they would have probably, not knowing that they would have been lactose intolerant, and the Vikings probably have been drinking milk for 1,000 years, right? Or however many years.
This part of Newfoundland, I guess, at the time over in aux Meadows area didn't have much milk, I guess, because.
Well, they would have brought their animals over, and they would probably have put their animals on the islands just off aux Meadows. There's a bunch of islands there. There's Great Sacred Island and Little Sacred Island and Warren's Island. And I would imagine that they would have had a little fairing, like a little dory kind of boat, right, to go out to the islands to mind their animals. And you know why I think they put them on the islands? Because in Newfoundland, up until the year 1900, we had a wolf, like a Newfoundland wolf, that in 1900 there was a call and to kill them all. And but prior to that, like, people would have been pretty vulnerable to this wolf and these wolves.
Right. So
right?
they would eat their livestock and
any livestock they had on the islands.
So they would take the animals on a boat to different islands. I think there's a few islands in Newfoundland and Labrador that still do that with sheep.
Yeah, a lot. Even up in the Northern Peninsula, they did that for years. They would put them out on. And so then they would just graze, and they didn't have to worry about them, and they would eat whatever is.
That must have been awkward, though, trying to load the animals on the boat and take them out on the water.
Yeah, but the Vikings were good seafarers. They probably took them on their big boat and load them all off, or put them all off there, and then.
They were very good seafarers.
Maybe some people stayed out on the island. Who knows? Like, yeah, actually, I love looking at Google Earth to see if there's, things. Potential sites, and I see like mounds that look kind of like the Viking mounds that existed by the Viking site out there. So I don't know.
Didn't you have some kind of theory that you were thinking about in some of the mounds that you saw?
In the mounds?
You were looking at the Google Earth and you thought maybe.
Yeah. I was thinking there potentially could have been animals and buildings for the caretakers of the animals out on that island. Yeah. Oh, and a lot of people
don't know about Leif Erikson. They think, Columbus discovered North America, right? So,
I know Christopher Columbus. Well, he did, but I mean, the Vikings discovered them before. They were here before. Yeah. And they did make a settlement in aux Meadows, which is a part of North America. So,
in the settlement, don't they have like replica, like things that you see on the side of the boat? They have the swords and the shields and stuff like that. They do a little play and things.
Yeah, it's a beautiful site, and it's very informative, and
it's
worth coming up our way to see. And
yeah, you also do some other things. I guess you could call yourself an entrepreneur for sure. You've got so many different things on the go. I guess I can pull up your website again.
Yeah. I also invented the product.
Is that on your website, the product, or would that be somewhere else?
The WHIZ trainer, TRAINER.com. And it's to teach little toddlers how to ice skate, because I was my boy now, he's 13, but when he was little, around 4, I took him to the rink and I said, I was trying to drag him around and I said, this is insane. I wish there was a better way. I wish I had something that I could put him in and he could go on. And I said it to my friend and she said, oh yeah, you should do that. So then I went to Newfoundland Labrador Women's Entrepreneur Program, and they led me on to Memorial University, and the outreach program helped me develop the prototype for this product. And so I've been selling it all over North America, a lot to the Midwest and to the other northern United States, and a lot of Canadians, a lot of northern Quebecers. And
I think I saw that one time with an episode with Rick Mercer, when he was ice skating somewhere on some ice, and the kids were using that, and they gave
No,
him.
I think the one you probably seen was like one that you push. This one, actually, you sit in, and it'll catch you if you fall. So this is brand new. Like, this is a brand new concept. The harness was just there to catch them, and then they don't fall and hurt themselves. So then they don't get discouraged, and it's easier for the parents, and it prevents a lot of if you click that,
Injuries. Yeah, that thing is really cool.
you can see it. Yeah.
Maybe we could get more of the tourists to try our skating loop over there in Bannerman Park with that. Have you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it works very well. I've got all 5-star reviews on Amazon and Etsy, and
I see you have a video here of a Norseman. Do you want me to play this?
That was a fun thing. I was playing with like iMovie, and I like fooling around with that stuff to make it.
I'll go ahead and play it. Here we go.
Yeah, because so my husband's like a performing chef. He's been asked on like Top Chef Canada and all that kind of stuff, but he's quite modest and he doesn't like to be in the limelight, so he's never, taken. That was just something fun I made like years ago. We've got some views. You can see the icebergs and sunsets and islands. Yeah, and we still keep lots of there's leaves.
So it looks like a very fun place to go visit. 100%.
Yeah, we get people from all over the world. I say, it's funny because we don't get a lot of Newfoundlanders. We only probably get about 5% Newfoundlanders, and then 95% of our tourists are from all over.
My brother loves Vikings, and when he came home from Texas to come and visit, that's where he wanted to go. So we went up there. Took my parents up there.
Oh, awesome! Oh, they did. Okay, so that's good. So we do get some, but it's really weird. Like most of our, we'll get about 36,000 tourists coming to Lansing Meadows every year. And
well, it's funny because you mentioned about how that, like, the size of Newfoundland Labrador, people think it's very tiny, right? But when you actually get on the island, like if you're going to drive from St. John's to Lansing Meadows, how many hours do you think that is now, Gina? You've drove that?
It's 11 hours. So I've done it, like we would leave here in the afternoon and then drive to like Deer Lake or Rocky Harbor and stay overnight and then get up the next morning, and then by lunch we're in Lansing Meadows. So that's usually how we do it. Lately I've been flying up on Provincial Airlines, which is 1 hour, but my husband will drive up in the summer.
So I was talking off air about some of the people who want to come visit Newfoundland and Labrador and want to do some Viking paranormal tourism, and wanted to know, where to stay and things like that. And I guess, you've got several different places there that can stay. How long in advance do they have to book if they're going to be doing something like that?
Well, it's starting to book up for next summer, but so like they would probably have to start talking, thinking about it now, because things are probably, gradually. And people come in June month to see the icebergs. So I found years prior to COVID, we didn't get a lot. Like we would only get 50% of what we get in July and August in June. But now we're getting about on par what we, so the season starts as soon as the park is open on June 1st, and people come see icebergs, and then but then, July and August, the weather's a little bit better, but you get people into September. And so there's lots to do.
Yeah, and I can present some of the lodgings there that you have there. You have the Valhalla B&B rentals, and these are some of the rooms there. These are all in Canadian dollars. And is there a most popular room that you have?
I think the leaf room is the most popular because it has view of the ocean, and then it has a private bathroom. They all have private bathrooms, but the Eric room has a bathroom across the hall, but it is private. And then
Leaf, is that this one here? Leaf Ocean View?
I think I've done, that's an old picture. I need to, I've done some renos to it. But if you go down, you can see like this is our newest one, the Petals. That's a brand new one that we just built last year. And that's a little 1-bedroom cottage, and it has beautiful, right? And then that's on the same property as the other 2 houses, the Coils and the Wavies. And so again, after Annie Proulx, the writer of the Shipping News, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning author. She actually wrote Brokeback Mountain too. She's very famous. And it's funny because when she came to Newfoundland, actually she wrote my mom a letter, because she wrote some of the book at my mom's bed and breakfast when my mother owned it. She wrote my mom a letter thanking her for the leftover pancakes, because she only had enough money for gas to get home. And now she's like a multi-million-dollar, she had the rights to the movies, and she gets invited to talks all over the world, and so she's very, very popular, and become very, very successful with her books.
So the cottages are very popular, and Gunner's Cove is that the name of the cove in the background here in the picture?
Yes, Gunner's Cove. It's beautiful. This is facing the east, so the Atlantic Ocean, whereas L'Anse aux Meadows is facing the northwest, so it's the Strait of Belle Isle. So the icebergs will come down here, and at L'Anse aux Meadows, you get them going both ways. You can see them going down the Strait of Belle Isle or the East Coast. And here we'll get the moon and the sunrise. So we get the moon and the sun. It's funny because I've always been somebody that loved moons and suns. Like we would go to Mexico and I would always buy things that have moon and sun. And I never knew why I did, but I can understand, I just love that. And I guess that's a pagan druid thing, but I feel very connected to the earth about, the moon and the sun and yeah. Hello.
And there's you there, and I just had a picture of your husband up there, and he's the head chef.
Yeah.
Adrian. There he is there with his lobsters. And looks lobsters like he's having a boil up or something over there on the bottom. Is he in the winter? Or is that that looks like they're at a sleep?
Yeah, we have fires on the beaches there, lots of driftwood along the beaches. I love beach combing and finding, sea glass, and actually down by our house.
I love sea glass. Yeah.
I know we've got a whole beach that's filled with sea glass. And so years ago, there used to be a shop down there, and people would throw out, I think they would have a drink and then they would throw out their bottle. So the beach is constantly washing up this wonderful beach glass, really colorful, lovely pieces and so my little boys, as they're older now, but when they were little, they had a little shell shop, beach glass shop, and they would sell things to the tourist, right? And they would make sculptures out of the beach glass and driftwood and all that kind of stuff. So that was really special. Yeah. So we would call it Mermaid's Tears, because there's a story about a sea captain and a mermaid, and how the glass was the tears of the mermaid, because Neptune banished her to the bottom of the sea and he forbid the relationship. And
yes, we have a lot of mermaid culture here, don't we? Folklore and things like that.
I was supposed to tell you about Marguerite de Roberval. So the story about she was marooned onto an island nearby called Belle Isle. And so that was during, her father was appointed a viceroy by the King of France. I think it was in the 1600s, early 1600s. And he was commissioned to come settle New France. And so he decided that he asked his niece if she would go with him. And she agreed, because her parents were after dying. And so then, but on the way over, she fell in love with one of the boys on the ship, and he forbid the relationship and marooned her onto the island. And I think his motive was to get her fortune, right? Because she probably inherited a fortune and he wanted a fortune. So he left her onto an island just off of Meadows there. And so she managed to, in her ordeal, they actually talk about how she had a baby and the baby died. She had a nursemaid that was put off with her and the lover, and they all died. And then she survived, and she actually killed a polar bear in her ordeal. So we do get polar bears in the spring of the year up in northern Newfoundland, all over the place, right? So you got to be careful. Like I remember one time my mom and I were out walking and we forgot about the polar bears in the spring, and we're like, and then we walking in St. Anthony out to Fishing Point, and then we're like, oh, we better get home because we forgot, and then we remembered, and then we ran home. But so this was a story. I mean, some other places claim it as their own, like Harrington Harbor over on the Labrador side, and Harpoon Island, and so they don't really know where the Isle of Demons, they called it, is. But I don't know why they called it the Isle of Demons. I don't know if it was a sound that, like, when they drove up to the island, it sounded, because of the wind blowing off the rocks, it sounded like demons or things like that.
I pulled up here that the Isle of Demons is a phantom island, known once as.
But I think it's Bella. Yeah. Bella was off, and I mean, it would have been pretty desolate on that island for her for them to survive, right? They would have. Because
you never know. I've heard people talk about it. It's one of those mysterious islands where we don't know where it is.
Yeah, they don't really know where it is, but the story actually is she went back to France because she got saved by some Basque fishermen, and they brought her back to France, and then she became friends with the Queen of France, whose name was Marguerite as well, and she became a teacher. And she used to tell the story. So that's how we know about it. That's how we know the story was true. But I don't know what his motive was to leave his niece onto an island, just because she fell in love with him. But I think it was that he wanted her fortune.
Definitely lots of different sagas with when it comes to the ocean and Vikings and things like that.
Yeah, I feel very connected, and I feel very special to have lived, this many years there, and to see those sunsets and moon.
You have some art there. You were telling me about some of the artwork that you have also there.
Yeah, so in the gallery we'll sell local paintings, and original paintings and lino cuts, and we sell moose antler and whalebone carvings that are done by the local people, and then lots of books and merchandise of the Norsemen. But so it's.
So you have to go check out the Norsemen and check out Gina and her books and all of her cool different inventions and things that she has, and of course the Vikings. Go to the site. Check out the site, check out the Vikings. And you were saying there was some sort of a dinner show that they can go to also in the summer?
Dinner theater, but we found the quality of the food wasn't great because we would have to mass produce it. So now, there's sometimes events going on at different places, and then people go to that and then come and dine, and, and we find that's much more effective in terms of, but there are theaters like on the way up, like in Gros Morne, they have a theater. So you might want to, the theater is really good quality, and people have been doing it so long that, so you would want to check that out. But we usually have music events, and, there's a lot going on up our way too. But we don't do the theater anymore. Although I was thinking about maybe getting some of the people that we used to have a theater at Norstead, and they would do one called The Death of Balder. And it was about all the Viking gods. So it was one-man show, but he would do all of the Viking gods like Balder and Thor, Odin, and it was a whole story. So I was trying to maybe get him to come up during the Iceberg Festival, or maybe
Oh,
3.
that'd be fun. Yeah,
And then
definitely.
there was another one, the monk, that they did in the boat shed, and then they did a puppet show called Why the Sea is Salt. And the funny thing is, all those actors that did come to Norstead and do those performances are now like the heads of the Arts and Culture Center in St. John's and the LSPU Hall, like the head of the LSPU Hall. And so, they've moved on, but we did do that for 5 years, and it was wonderful. And that's what we did. Like, we would, they would come and dine, and then we would send them over to but yeah, we're more fine dining, so it doesn't really work with the theater anymore. But yeah, we do send them to whatever's going on. Yeah.
So definitely check out Miss Gina and her site. And is there anything that you want to say to your fans who are listening?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've never done a podcast before, but thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you have any questions, or put it in the comments, and I'll feel free to ask me anything, and I'll reply.
So I'll put your home screen up there again, and you can tell your people, your fans, and everybody on where they can find you and how they can reach out to you if they have questions about your place. And
I'd love to see you all come up, and and I love chatting with people and telling them interesting things and recommended sites and things that only locals would know. So if you want to know that, I can guide you to where to go. And but there is lots to see besides that, right? But
yeah, come up and do some paranormal tourism in Newfoundland and Labrador, and check out the Vikings. Take great care of you and her husband, and you can go to. It's never been done, to my knowledge, of any actual paranormal investigation there, so that would be a fun adventure for a team to come and do.
I definitely feel there's spirits in the Meadows.
Yeah, you did mention that, especially over in the cave and stuff, and at the actual site, the historical site where the mounds are.
Yeah. Loretta Decker might be able to tell you a little bit about,
Yeah, you were saying she's with Parks Canada, and she's done a few, shout out to Loretta here if you're listening. She's done a few Viking ghost stories and haunting at the Canadian World Heritage Site. So I'll try to reach out to her and see if I can get Loretta on the podcast, with team up with a couple other people who are interested about the Vikings. But Gina, thanks so much for being on the show today, and I really enjoyed talking with you. And check out Gina's books too. She's got some really fun books for children with Vikings and puffins, all kinds of fun different things.
They're informative, and they're good for adults too. Like I say, my husband said he learned more from the Viking one than he ever knew about Vikings, even after being there for 20 years.
And what do you recommend at the restaurant? Do you have a flagship meal that you have there that's one of the most popular ones? I saw them with the lobster and stuff.
The lobster's fantastic. Scallops. We do mackerel, or we do codfish is probably one of our biggest things. Figgy duff is a Newfoundland dish, but we use like a partridge berry pie, lingonberry. A lot of Scandinavians would know about lingonberry, and so we try to forage too. Like I do a lot of foraging along the beach and use like oyster leaf and beach pea flowers and stuff to garnish the plate. So there's lots of,
nice. So you get the full experience.
Yeah, so we try to
full Newfoundland and Labrador experience.
I'd love for a botanist to come up and teach me even more, because it'd be nice to discover even more that's edible there. And I'm sure there are things like angelica that the French used to make candy out of. And
interesting. So go check out Gina. Check out her place. Do you want to give a shout out again to all the names of the Norseman restaurant, the Valhalla by the Sea?
Yeah, Valhalla Bed and Breakfast. Annie's Retreat, the Gaia Art Gallery, the Whiz Skate Trainer, and then my books, Puffin Playing by the Sea, the new recruits, the dinosaur on the prairie, and Snorri Thorfinnsson firstborn.
All right, Gina, thanks so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate having you on, and it was great chat. Thank you so much.
You're nice to meet you.
We're going to leave now. I'm going to do another station ID. You're listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network. I'm 107.7 FM, New Orleans. I'm 105.3 Gulf Coast, and we'll end on music.
Oh, that sounds like